Hi YouTube. As a departure from our normal off-grid stuff, we've treated ourselves and come to this club site in Poole. A lot of the pitches are what's called super pitches. You can see this one at the motorhome on there. Nice little hedge all around. Picnic table, which isn't much use in this weather. Well, I suppose you could, but I've just got the scooter tied up to it at the moment. Nice and private, but the secret of this super pitch is it has this service bollard, and another word for super pitch is fully serviced pitch. And what we've got here is fresh water, wastewater disposal, which you can pipe in if you're tricky. You've got a television point, which we don't use, but the electric is very handy, of course. And this one is a 10 amp supply, which is quite generous. You can see all the breaker switches there are up. Mrs. P's already managed to trip the bollard once by trying to put too much power through it. A word on the electrics. If you're going out for the day, always remember to unplug it at the bollard, otherwise you'll be leaving the live end on the floor, and if there's any water knocking about, it can be a bit dodgy. Another thing is, make sure you unwind all your lead. I've got a spool holder, and it's easy just to walk out across the site and get all the lead out straight, because if you try and unreel it off the reel, it ends up in a big mess on the floor with all sort of coily bits stuck up, and it's difficult to wind back on. So that's what's best to do about that. Also, I found this out skiing, because the cable gets warm, if there's any snow on the ground, it tends to melt down into the snow, which is not a problem until the snow refreezes, and you've got a hell of a job getting your cable out then. Expanding on the 240 volt electrical side of things, I bought this handy little display from eBay. It's about £20. And I've wired it into the 240 volt circuit. You've actually got 240 volts onto the back of these things, so you've got to be aware of that. But it tells you quite a bit of information. So there it's showing you the voltage supplied from the bollard, showing you the current amount of power that's being used by the motorhome, and the corresponding amps. So it tells you exactly what you're using electrically in the motorhome, and this can save you tripping the bollard. But it's if you're on a campsite where you're paying for 10 amps and you're not actually getting 10 amps, you can use this to help with your argument. So if we put the heating on, to electric 1, we can see that the electric element, the single electric element, is drawing about 950 watts, which is what it's supposed to be. It's equivalent to 4.21 amps. And if we put it onto electric 2, we can see that it goes up to almost 1800 watts and nearly 8 amps, which is okay if you're on a 10 amp supply. The problem arises is if you then decide to put the kettle on. So that's a 1 kilowatt kettle. You can see there it's nearly 2.5 kilowatts and it's pulling over 10 amps, 11 points, just over 11 amps. So this, coupled with any extra gear you've got on, I could very well trip the bollard if it's set at 10 amps. Okay. Another thing is, so you don't drive off with the electrical lead still connected to the vehicle, I put this little reminder around the gear stick, and it's just a reminder to tell you to disconnect the electric hookup lead. It's actually belt and braces, because the Sargent system does have an audible warning if you start the engine with it still plugged in. Each pitch has its own fresh water supply, which is very handy because it saves you having to mess about either driving to the tap or going with containers to the tap. And I use these flexible hoses, which are really good. There's no messing about. I've concocted a bit of a filling point there because I think it's important, if your freshwater tank isn't vented, if you've got mains pressure going on to the filling point, once the tank's full, the water's got nowhere to go, and it can actually blow your filling hose off the tank neck. I've had this before in a German motorhome, so I've fitted these holes here, so if there's any water, when it fills up, it overpressures out of these holes and doesn't put any pressure on the tank. But yeah, it's a good point, your own fresh water. I carry two types of hoses, but mainly just use the expanding type because it's so easy to use and light to carry. The cassette reel there, I haven't used it for years because it's such a pain to wind back in. Plus the fact I suspect it holds water inside. The hose which you can't get rid of. The flexible hose, you can just hang that up in the air and whiz it round, and it gets rid of all the water from inside. It's great. I've got double male connector if I want to add to that hose, but I've never had to yet, and some tap adapters. That's commercial tap adapter for farms, and that's your standard one. So for the wastewater, I'm just using an all length of hose pipe. I carry about 10 metres of hose pipe, just cut off from stuff I use for the garden, and it connects up to the motorhome tank there. It's a bit of a lash up really, I'm going to do something to improve that, but it works okay. Drains away very slowly but surely because it's only got a small head of water there, but it flows and does its job. So there you have it, fully serviced pitch.